Good afternoon, everybody. I am expecting a few more people to show up, although maybe not so many, this being Friday afternoon. But I'm going to give this a few minutes. I'm actually going to put a timer up so everybody can keep track and make it easier to edit later. But we're going to get started in about 5 minutes. Again, I'm just waiting for a few more people to log in. So I'll talk to you in a minute. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to get started. We were hoping for a few more people to turn out today, but we are recording this as always so that people will be able to catch up online. We'll send out a link to the YouTube channel as well as the PowerPoint presentation, probably Monday, but soon after we're finished here. So let's get started. We're here to talk about disability records in CSD cares. We blocked off 2 hours for all of these, but there really is not that much material. And as I've said before, what we're trying to do here is actually have a number of brief webinars rather than a giant presentation on the entire new system so that you can go back and watch these in bite-sized chunks and just look at a specific content area. In terms of disabilities, though, I thought, first of all, I thought that there wasn't much of a reason to have this because it's very simple. But then, if it's so simple, why isn't there any information in the system? So, very little disability information can be found right now. But it is possible to put what we need into the system. So, I just want to go over, first of all, what it is that we're trying to do here and then get into how to enter that information. So first of all, we are talking about how to put information into the new CSD Cares system. It's been up for a bit over 2 years now, so I'm sure you know where it is. If your job duties require you to be putting in disability information, but you don't have access to that for some reason, what you'll need to do is start a ticket in ServiceNow, which is one of the related um, programs. It's all together on the dashboard. You can see right now that the screenshot that you're seeing is my dashboard, which has got several different programs that you can access. So the ServiceNow is where you have the knowledge base, where you have more in-depth training materials. There are short videos. Um, there are walkthrough at your own pace trainings that are interactive. And there are also one sheets that will just quickly show you how to do different things. So if you don't have access at all, there's a road to access. I keep meaning to include that as a slide and not doing that. So apologies for that. But we handed that out at a couple of the EDP meetings. So if you can locate one of those. Otherwise, start a ticket, or if you're not able to start a ticket, find someone who can on your behalf. Okay. So this year we really need, I don't know that we'll get through everything and have a complete system online, but we do need everyone to take certain steps this year, by which I mean very soon now, like not by the end of the program year, but right now as we're getting into it. So we need to get all the children in the system with funding. New children can only be added through the Schoolmint system. There's no other way to get them in for reasons that have to do with our collaboration with CPS. We have to use their intake system. Um, we need to have children in the classrooms and attendance taken, and the required documentation, anything that we come out and ask you for, we need to get it in quickly. As new modules roll out, as we continue to give training, we expect people to participate, to review the information, and if you can't figure out what you're supposed to be doing or if it's not working, please start a ticket, get in contact with us. Don't just give up. Okay. Having said that, today we're going to talk about a few things in CSD Cares. First of all, we're going to take a moment to look at the policy environment surrounding disabilities, which will explain why we're asking for the things that we're asking for and why the input is structured the way that it is. So there's two pieces to it. One has to do with eligibility in children with disabilities, and the other piece then is the program requirements for services for children. So why am I talking about eligibility and enrollment again? So first of all, there's a tiny little history lesson. Before the program was expanded to be preschool for all, the state-funded PFA and PI programs for children birth to 5 used to be targeted to children with disabilities, primarily. So when the program was expanded to allow all children to enroll, that piece of the eligibility system was kept in place, which means that children who come to you with IEPs or IFSPs are categorically eligible. That means they are eligible. It does not matter what their family income is. Um, I wouldn't say that they're all going to be eligible. They still need to live in the city of Chicago to uh, participate in any CPS funded program. There's just no income limit for families with children with disabilities. But this is where that comes from. Not only are they eligible, but uh, in this from the implementation checklist, this is actually the 3 to 5 document, but the same is true for birth to 3. When you have established your eligibility criteria at the program level, it should prioritize children with IEPs as well as other children at high risk for um, academic failure, is the way that they put it. So in addition to children with IEPs, actually, children whose screening indicated delays in development, although the way that this works in practice, we're really not normally screening them until they arrive. So I'm not sure how you would use that as part of an eligibility criteria, but definitely children who either already have an IEP or IFSP or who are in the process of getting one should be considered eligible. Okay, so under Head Start and early Head Start, and this is confusing when you have the dual funding for a classroom, but having a disability is not an eligibility criteria. However, the program uh, is supposed to have at least 10% of its actual enrollment as children with disabilities. Um, if you're wondering why I have a slide with something crossed out on it, that's because there is a new edition of the Head Start performance standards that was just released, maybe 6 weeks ago, something like that. And they have made changes. So I preserved the edits in this, what I'm showing you here, because I want you to see this. The definition of 10% has changed. So it is not based on your funded enrollment. It's based on your actual enrollment going forward based on the new program performance standards. What that means in practice is if you're funded for 100 children, but you only have 9, or you have 90 children enrolled during the year, then 10% is 9. But if you go have some turnover and you've served 110 children, then 10% of 110 is 11. So it's not a set number that you actually know at the beginning of the year. It just means 10% of all children served. Okay. So in terms of the services that we're supposed to deliver, again, under the Early Childhood Block Grant, they want to see all the children screened. They want evidence of the screening results. I mean, they recognize if a child already has an IEP that they don't need a screening because there is presumably progress measures as part of the IEP. They also want evidence of communication with the parents, that children who have been identified with the developmental concerns have been referred. So basically, that means if a child comes in, either presents in some other way to that causes concern, or when you do your developmental screening, you find that the score indicates that they should have a referral, then they should have a referral. So we want to see again, the results, the interview, all those things as part of the documentation. Terms of screening, This is just because a question I get are, is it the 45-day screening for Head Start? Yes, the 45-day part is specifically a Head Start requirement, but the fact that all children have to be developmentally screened is clearly part of the early childhood block grant uh, as well. So yeah, pretty much all children that you are serving need to either have a screening, and the only real reason they wouldn't is because they already have a diagnosed disability. Okay. So the federal funding, again, programs have to ensure the individualized needs of children are met, including children with disabilities. Um, so not only are you supposed to have IEPs or IFSPs if you can get them, but then obviously the programming, the room setup, everything has to be consistent with compliant with the plan that is set forth for the child. Okay. So again, what they're saying here basically is even if someone has been referred, they've been evaluated and not been given an IEP, if there are still developmental concerns or challenges facing the child, that the program is supposed to address them and document how they're doing that. Okay. So um, this is getting into more detail about that. Um, but in effect, you're supposed to not only have the IP, again, know what it says, have programming that is compliant with it. Um, so, I mean, a lot of cases, what this means if the and it's, at least this is how we can justify what we do in the Chicago system. Um, Many times when your child has an IEP, they need to be transported for services. We need to document that. And what CPS will say is for anything other than speech, that the regular classroom isn't necessarily the appropriate setting to implement the IEP, and that's why there's services elsewhere. I also mostly included this slide just as a heads up, because as I was going through the new performance standards, I noticed that they're going through and lining out early Head Start. So eventually, they're going to want to call the entire Birth to Five program Head Start. I think that's going to be confusing, but that is what Office of Head Start is planning to do at this point. So everybody needs to be aware that going forward, if you see communication from the feds that just says Head Start, they're implying that up to Birth to Five program and early Head Start is involved as well. So here again, they've gone from just calling it Head Start to calling it Head Start Preschool because they're not really going to be able to use the same name. So that's why this is crossed out. So again, this notes that when a child has come with an IFSP and is turning 3, whether or not they're transitioning out of the program, it's the responsibility of the agency to work with the LEA, which in our case is going to be Chicago Public Schools, to make sure they can be evaluated if necessary and have a smooth transition into the 3 to 5-year-old program. Okay. So having talked about that overall policy framework of what we're supposed to be doing, now I'm going to take a look at the PIR. You can see how those kind of vague policy parameters that we talked about in performance standards get translated into a report that we have to submit. So I'm showing you this for a reason. So the first question that we have on the PIR about disabilities is not actually about whether they have an IEP or IFSP. They want to know how many children have been referred for an evaluation. These are questions that once upon a time were not on the annual report. Instead, the feds would come back and ask us these questions about any agency that had not met the 10% requirement of enrollment of children with disabilities. Since we had to submit that every year anyway, they've changed the report to just ask us upfront for everyone, and now we don't have to pull that together for the waiver process, which is nice. So they want to know how many children were referred for an evaluation. So this means either through parents expressing concerns or as a result of the developmental screening, um, a referral is indicated. And when that happens, you should try to refer them. So then they want to know how many of those children for whom referral was indicated were evaluated. And of those, how many received a diagnosis and how many did not. And then again, as you saw from the bureaucratic language earlier, even if you don't um, successfully navigate the process to get an IEP or IFSP, they still want to know that the concerns are being addressed. So they want to know if you're providing any individualized services to the children who were referred. So that's the first page, that's C22. And then C23, for children who are referred for an evaluation and didn't get one, they want to know why. So the big ones are that the agency being CPS, assigned the child to a lower level of plan. It's called response to intervention. The parents refuse the evaluation, or the evaluation is pending and hasn't happened yet. So you notice a little line that says specify. So anytime you're going to put other in any documentation, we need words after that so we know what other means. Otherwise, we have to hunt you down at the end of the year and find out. And then we get to the point of how many children had an IEP or IFSP. Um, when was the diagnosis? Uh, was it prior to this year? Did they come in with one, or did they get one during the course of the year? And of those, how many have not received services? Okay. And again, this is the same for IFSPs. It's a different line. Uh, most PIRs only ask one of these questions of the others, but for some reason, Early Head Start Child Care Partnership asked about both IEPs and IFSP. All right. And then there's a specific list, and this is a pull down menu in the system, but there's a specific list of disabilities that we're looking for a count of. Not all of these are commonly used in Illinois, however. So you may not have many of these different categories represented, and that's fine. Okay, so having done that, we can see what we're trying to do here, which is both state and federal programs want us to document that every child has received a developmental screening, that there's been a referral if it's necessary, and that there's a documentation that if they received an IEP or IFSP, that we have it. And now looking at this slide, I realize what I did not include is that they also want information about any services provided to a child who was not diagnosed but was referred. So I'll add that before I send it out. Those are the categories of information that everybody wants. So we're actually going to start not with CSD cares proper, but with Schoolment. And the reason for this, as I mentioned at the beginning, that for PFA and PI programs, disability is an eligibility criteria. So all new children who are enrolling in the program have to come through Schoolment. And if you're going to use that as the reason that they're eligible, it needs to be documented. So there's a place on the school grant application to indicate whether or not the child has an IEP or IFSP. And if that's not marked, then when the program is deciding whether or not the child is eligible, it's not going to be counted. So it just looks like this. It's pretty simple. Um, it's on the first page of the school admit application down near the bottom. Just ask, do you have an IEP or IFSP? But the answers aren't just yes or no. There's also a place to mark suspected, which means they don't have one now, but they're trying to get one. So any of these categories other than no is going to be passed on to CSD Cares and be part of the eligibility calculation for funding.
I'm
So
unable to see anything.
can everybody else see my screen?
I mean, I can
Yeah,
hear
we
you
can
perfectly,
see
but I
your
can't see the
screen.
screen.
Are you on your phone or are you on a laptop?
No, I'm on my desktop. It was starting really great and everything, but now I can't see anything.
You may have to exit and come back to the meeting.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
All right, I haven't seen anything different from here. Okay. So, as always, and as everyone is aware, the new system kind of has some bugs. So when I say information from SchoolMint should be reflected in CSD Cares, the fact is when I was looking at some test cases to make sure this was working, I noticed sometimes it wasn't. So here is an example on the screen. You can see that it was indicated that they have an IEP or IFSP. So that's in the bottom left. That's great. It worked just fine, and that should be counted. But for whatever reason, it does not count them as having a disability, which is odd. So if something like that happens, you get the information over from SchoolMint and it's incomplete. Please start a ticket in ServiceNow. I don't, even though when you're looking at the screen, you see there are edit pencils there. I don't know that it will let you edit all of these fields that are coming over. My team and I can edit most of these fields. So again, if it comes over wrong, start a ticket and let us know, and we'll try to get to it and fix it as soon as possible. Did I just, yes, okay. So that should take care of the eligibility piece. Although if it's missing, it may still work if you go through and put the rest of the information in. So I would add, if a child has an IEP, I would add that information in detail, which we'll go over in a minute, before applying funding to them, just to make sure that it's being counted properly. Okay, so the next thing we need to be able to document is developmental screenings. Most specific programmatic information about services to children can all be found on the same place, which is the child contact record. On the right side of your screen, there are a bunch of boxes that are called related boxes or related lists in the lingo of CSD Cares, and they go down quite a bit. So if you're looking at the page when you first get to it, there are several things you'll see, but you can scroll down and down and down, and all the child's information is lined up there. So we're looking at what we call screenings and assessments. There is a box, you can see it here. This is different from the developmental screening health events. I wish it wasn't, but this is the way that it's been constructed. So the health events um, contain information. Child is meeting EPSDT. criteria, which we went over a couple weeks ago, but they don't contain any detailed information. So that's why for health records, we have this separate category of items called a health condition. And similarly for screenings and disabilities, we mark that they're done, but then to put any information about them, we have to go down to the proper related list. So you would click the new box next to where it says screening assessments, and then it'll give you these options. For screening a child, it is an individual screening. So you'll mark the individual button and hit next. When you get the new screening or assessment screen, um, it says that the required information has a star next to it, but actually more things than are starred are required. But it wants to know what type of screening it is, the site, the classroom, what date it was done, who did it, and if it's a staff person that uh, that administered the screening, then you want to look them up in that completed by box and actually put the link to their contact record in here. So it's not just typing the name in, it's an actual HR file that's connected to it. Um, and then completion location. So you can see the save button from here, but you're not actually done. So once you fill these out, you just pull down on that scroll bar and go to the next or to the bottom half of the page, which looks like this. There's a couple more questions that get into the results here. So we want to know what the outcome was, which is basically okay, rescreening is needed or referral is indicated. Um, and then, of course, what type of developmental screening was given. So when you fill these out, then you can save it. As you can see here, if the reason you didn't screen someone is that they already had an IEP, we don't want you to just leave this blank as it comes out as a screening that wasn't done. Instead, go ahead and put the record in and just say that the disability is on file. And that just shows why it wasn't done. It'll show up on the report with the status, and everything will be great. So that is the IP information. So there is a text box here, you notice. And if you want to put detailed information about what services you're provided, how many hours of service and so on, there's a place to type that in here. But at the moment, that's not required because we're really using this to try to get statistics. Okay. The next section is referrals. This was hard for me to do because some things as a citywide administrator have a slightly different view, and I'm not allowed to do everything that you can with child records. So the referrals are also in a related box when you scroll down the child record. If you're me, there is no button that says new, but you should have one. So you'll go in and click on the new referral and then put in the information. Um, in this case, it's not so much that there's a lot of information to input as we want to connect the fact that they've been referred to these other elements. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Right. So here in the related tab of the referral, you can see there's a disabilities blank, there's a screening and assessments blank. And so anything that you create in CSD Cares is an object. So if we look, I'll take you back to the last slide for a second. They see there's not an ID number like you normally have because you get to name the referrals here. So when you put the information in, right, they called these IP IFSP to IEP or whatever, but you can put the child's name and the year date, whatever is most convenient. But you were able to recognize it then, so you can go into the referral tab and connect that. You can do that from either place. So from right here, you can click on disabilities and connect to the disability record that you entered before, or the other way around, you can go into the disability record and there's a way to add the referral. Either way, you just have to know what it's called to search for it in the box. So that's why they let you name it yourself, which is nice. Rather than have it be R12345. The disability is like this. You see, the disability is a code that is generated by the system. You can name the referral. This is not. Okay. Yeah, let me look at this. I think a slide was missing. But to add the disability record, I did that. So this is when you get a successful evaluation, you're adding the record itself. This is not something you can name, but thankfully, it's unlike many views, you get very clear data about them visible from the list. So we can see not just that there is a disability record for this child, but that it's an IFSP, it's an IFSP, that the primary disability was autism and the secondary was speech and language. So this is the way the records look. Again, they're in this related box on the child's record. So inside, again, there's a lot of information. Not everything that is required is marked as required, which is kind of typical. But these things we definitely want to fill out: what type of disability, when was the eligibility determination date? And that is usually, but not always, the start date. It would have been the date that the child was evaluated and found in need of an IP. So some of these other pieces are optional. However, I mean, for an IEP, you wouldn't necessarily have one, but if you look on here, you see there's an early intervention number line. So for an IFSP, like an IEP would have an ID, which is actually the same as the child's CPS ID. It's 8 digits long and almost always starts with a 6 right now. But the EI number is different. You use that in place of the CPS ID for this. So it's helpful to have that because then we can track down the specific document involved if we need it. And here again, you could do this from the referral, but you can also do it here from inside the disability record. You can search for the referral and add it, and then they'll be tied together. This is important because later when we're trying to produce the answers to those questions about how many children were referred and how many of them got a diagnosis, if they're connected together, we should be able to eventually just get a report that can give us those numbers based on these relationships. So again, the start date, end date are usually for a year. If the child is, reevaluated and re-upped, you put in another one for another year. And we're just trying to have each year with its own record. This helps us to see who's got a new one. How many used to have one but are no longer in need. Which children got an IEP during the course of the year. So the dates are important. The end date again isn't starred. It isn't required by the system, but it's typically a year later, and we do want to know when it expires to see if the child has been reevaluated if necessary. Okay, so those are the three parts. of the disability record. We need the screenings and the
Can I ask a
referrals.
question about those date entries?
Yes.
Okay.
Go.
So for children that have an IEP and then have their annual review the next year, they're not necessarily getting a new IEP. The IEP is
Right.
just being updated, right? So during
Yes.
an annual review, do you want us to go into their current IEP disability and change the start date and end date, or are we leaving that the same?
I don't, well, I don't want anyone to be changing the start date because that will fool the system into identifying a child as a new IEP this year,
Right.
rather than someone that came into the year with one. So I think we're going to need a new record.
So you
It,
want us to create an entirely new disability for the IEP after an annual review?
yes,
Okay. Thank you.
because it's going to be different. This is not going to be the result of a referral anymore. Because when we look at this year, if someone had an IEP prior to September, then it's not a new one.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, I'm just always using this slide. Um, we we really need everyone to begin using the system right now in terms of enrollment. We have about half the children completely in, and the other half are either missing information, um, or not present. We really need everyone to get that done really in the next month. Uh, we need attendance here. We're going to be rolling out new attendance forms, which are going to be easier for us to deal with anyway, uh, soon. But I know nobody wants to go in and do that. If you can just get all the way through the enrollment process and take attendance in the system, then we will abandon that need to collect the attendance information any other way, and there'll be no more spreadsheet. So I'm hoping we'll only need to use that for a couple months, and then everybody will be up to speed. Um, we do need the health records. And again, we really need everyone to engage here, especially since there will be new things coming out. As they do, we'll put updates in the knowledge base. We'll be new trainings, and we're sending out updates, and we need everyone to stay on top of those. The big example of that is that what I'd love to do as the end of this discussion is to show you reports, but I looked at what we have so far in the system, and the two problems with them are: one, most of you don't have access to them, and two, key information is not displaying as it's supposed to. So we are going to be prioritizing, um, working with the developers on improvements to reporting over the next 6 weeks or so. So we will probably end up having another presentation that is just about reporting. So we'll go back over some of this health information, some of the disability information, and just kind of demonstrate the new reporting features. So stay tuned for that. That's coming hopefully by the end of the year. Um, Again, I keep mentioning ServiceNow and the knowledge base, so I want everybody to know where to find that on your CSD uh, dashboard, which is what you sign into when you're signing into CSD Cares. You'll notice there one of the tiles there that says now, like this. This is ServiceNow. There are two parts of it. One of which I hope everyone has discovered by now is the ticket system. So if you're having difficulty entering information, it's not coming out right, you can start a ticket. let us know. Please, when you do that, there's some basic information that we need to be able to help. So make sure you tell us which child or children. Give us their date of birth or ID, because in the database, there are tens of thousands of children, and many of them have the same name. Um, so it's much easier to do that. But also within ServiceNow is the knowledge base, which has, again, it's got a list of training videos, it's got uh, training documents, it's got little courses that you can walk through. Um, Specific things. So you get there. I've got a screenshot here of the pull down menu. So it says knowledge bases because there's different groups that are of trainings that are organized for different audiences. So if you go into there and pick CSD Cares for Delegate Agency, you'll see a breakout that looks like this. Behind each of these, there are like specific micro trainings and documents on how to find this or how to enter that. So they're very useful, and even if they're not useful, um, they don't take very long. So it's worth trying. Because they're literally talking about 2 minute, 3 minute videos and very short targeted walkthroughs for specific things. And that, okay. So, and be aware of that tool. We have received a number of tickets so far this fall since we opened it up, but honestly, um, based on the number of issues that I know are there, we haven't received as many as I would have expected. So I think not everyone can find it. So again, go in there if you're needing assistance with something, hit the button that says get help. Um, I like this better as a way to get a hold of us than just sending us an email or calling, because it creates an ongoing record of what the issues were and how they were resolved, which is useful to making there be fewer issues in the future. Okay, so it's a small group, which is why everyone's not muted. Do we have any other questions?
I do have a couple of other questions.
Okay, go for it.
So for referral entering, if a child is transitioning from early intervention to CPS, the CFC is normally the one that does that referral, right? Do you still want us putting that referral into the system as well?
Hmm. I think I do, because we want to know that they are being evaluated. You don't actually have to do the referral. You do, as the performance standards indicate, you need to follow up with the family to make sure that it's being done.
Right.
Right. So that's really all you're documenting, that that step
Okay.
has been taken.
And then my other question for the disabilities input, can you just clarify what you want us putting for service summary, active services, and active services with delays?
Well, the service summary is typically going to be uh, something like, and I'm making this up now, but like 30 minutes per week of speech or something like that.
Okay, so you
Um,
want us putting everything that the child is eligible for in their IEP or IFSP?
See, that's an interesting way to put it. Do I want everything that they're eligible for, or just what they're receiving? No, I think, yeah, what, like just what they're supposed to be receiving. So, but yeah, what they're eligible for.
Okay, right, because that's how I was reading it. But then for active services versus active services with delay, for active services, do you want us to put the services that those children are actually receiving, and then active services with delays is like something that the child's eligible for but not actively receiving? So, like for example, if a child is eligible for speech therapy through his IFSP, but he doesn't have a speech therapist assigned, would speech therapy
Yes,
then go in active services with delays?
yes,
Okay.
exactly. And I guess I skimmed over this now. It's on the slide when you get back through it, but I didn't think I called it out. As part of the referral, there is an item that says it's a drop down, and I don't, just like I don't have the ability to click on the new, I can't see it. Um, which was frustrating yesterday when I was putting this together. But it's got a drop down. It's called reason for delay.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are specific reasons that are mentioned, and it's best to pick one of them again and not choose other because we're trying to compile like a statistic, so the total number. But that's important. If they either there's been a referral, but the evaluation isn't happening, then in there you would put why there is a delay. And then if they have a diagnosis and if they're given an IP or an IFSP, but services aren't happening yet, we're also going to need to know that. So that we'll be asked about that as well.
Okay. And then I have one final question. Are we going to have capability to create list views on CSD Cares?
That's a good question, and it's one that we're going to have to bring up in our discussion about reporting in general. Because right now, um, those are locked for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
like including those of us who are supposed to be administrators. The only thing I could change about a list view is the column width.
Okay. Yeah,
And
I think it would be really helpful for each of our internal monitoring to be able to create those lists just to ensure that all of the kids that need disability or referral information put in have that information in there.
yes, so it would be nice to have a view that gave that. If not, we are looking for it'll end up being similar, but you'll have to go through reports. But a
Mm-hmm.
list of children um with their current status on is there a referral,
Right.
right there, and that's kind of what I wanted to be able to show when we scheduled this. And when I said things aren't displaying as they're supposed to, there are different ways to put together reports in Salesforce, um, based on different like constellations of fields. So the one where we could see all of the children in kind of the way that you're wanting to look at them,
Mm-hmm.
who were indicated, it was missing some information. From my point of view, anyway, it won't tell me what site they're at,
Okay.
which when we're dealing with a universe of 8,000 children is frustrating. Um,
Sure.
Right. And so then the one that we could get all that information up, I'm not sure what it was filtering out, but the list of kids was very short. And all of the kids that were in the other report are now missing. So that's why there's no report in this presentation, and I'm going to talk about it. But yeah, it would be nice to have a list view probably of referrals, I guess, and then they would have the connected items that you could see in the same frame.
Right.
Um, So we'll talk to them about that. So that's part of our goal is to get them to be a little more flexible of our ability to manipulate uh, the view and how the system works. So we're not quite there yet. I am hoping by roughly February that some of these things will be much better.
Okay. That was the last of my questions. Thank you.
I think. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, well, again, we will send out a copy of this and the slideshow early next week. And we will be back in 2 weeks for another one of these short videos. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Do appreciate you coming in on a Friday. And I'll be seeing you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.